Welcome back, or welcome to the Rebel Tech Podcast, where we discuss the promises and perils of emerging technology. And as we talk about, that's everything from the economic, social, and interpersonal implications of emerging technology. I'm David Dunmoyer, your host for the show today. Unfortunately, Zach Whiting could not join us, but fortunately, we are joined by, if you're in the tech policy community, who I'd consider to be the man on technology policy, Chairman Giovanni Capriglione. And really excited to have you for a number of reasons. I think first of which, and it was intentional, you're the first lawmaker guest we have on this show. And by way of giving a brief introduction, we'll get all into what you're working on in the interim and why you are the default tech guy. In addition to being chair of PIFs, which is Pensions, Investments, and Financial Services, you were recently appointed to chair the Select Committee in the House on AI and Emerging Technology. And there's already been some exciting movement there, plenty to come on the horizon. And as we've talked about in past communications products, you were the author of House Bill 2060, talking about artificial intelligence well before ChatGPT was a new shiny object. And I could go down the list of national awards on cybersecurity and data privacy, which we'll get into in the podcast. But I'll cut the intro short just so we can have the conversation. Just say thank you for joining us, Chairman.
Yeah, David, thanks for having me here. I'm glad to be with you and at TPPF and on the new podcast. So I'm excited to talk about AI, emerging technologies, and everything in between.
Awesome. Well, we'll get to all that. I know it's funny. Our CEO reminds us. I don't know. Your leadership in your office, how you do this. It's the interim. It's supposed to be the time where we kind of take a pause and a breather. Feel like that hasn't been the case.
No.
But I would like to, before we get into all that's happening now and into next session, I think it's important to reflect on the tremendous success that happened in technology last session. And that was due in large part to your leadership on a number of issues. But let's walk our listeners through what are some of the big tech things that happened that really set Texas up as the state leader on conservative tech policy.
Yeah, I mean, it has just been incredible how focused Texas has been on technology. And I think part of the reason is because we've just seen the value, right? We've seen the value economically. We've also seen the validity to the quality of people's lives here in Texas, right? And it is finally good for us to be able to say that Texas is the tech leader in the country and hopefully soon the world. Some of the things we worked on last session, you talked about our AI Advisory Council, HB 2060, which has set up a lot more conversation, I think, at the right time about what we're going to do in Texas when it comes to artificial intelligence frameworks and regulations. We worked obviously on the digital privacy bill, thanks to you and to others here at TPPF who helped us with finally creating for Texas residents effectively digital rights in terms of the ability to know what's being collected and to be able to, I think, from my perspective, a consumer-friendly bill on privacy to protect adults and their children. We did a lot with semiconductors, right? I mean, if you want to have a conversation about national security, it starts and stops with our ability in the country to be able to have semiconductors here built in America. And so we made a lot of progress in doing that, again, here in the state of Texas. We worked on things like improving upskilling and reskilling efforts at our community colleges, right? We are finally getting to the point where we're starting to know that you don't necessarily need a 4-year degree to move forward. We've created apprenticeship programs, and with HBA, really created an opportunity and a pathway for folks that maybe don't want to get the 4-year degree to still be able to help us in cybersecurity jobs, in tech jobs, and those kind of things. And quite frankly, you could go on and on, because whether it's the privacy, the legacy modernization, cybersecurity, working on making sure that, for instance, we have computer literacy programs in our high schools. We did things in the appropriations budgets, and we did it in the law. So from my perspective, that last session was an incredible session for technology, and I think the next one will be better.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we have it on the record now.
Yes,
I agree,
100%.
though, and I honestly, I love how, I mean, all the issues you just addressed there, they're not purely, Black Mirror screen, smart devices. Technology is holistic, right? And with workforce development and all the things that's part of the AI emerging tech discussion. I think that's something that gets lost in some of the nuance on technology because we get so hyper fixated on, again, that shiny object.
Yep.
Well, to, I guess, bring it into that holistic point, I don't know that a lot of our listeners fully understand. We can take House Bill 4, the data privacy bill, or any that you just laid out there. what's required for some of those really big ticket items to make it through from the initial introduction of the bill to the hearings to the coalition building. Was there anything different about last session that really made it a bellwether year for technology policy in Texas? From your point of view, you've been working on this for more than half a decade. So what was it about last session?
I think we finally understood a process by which we would be able to pass these sorts of bills, right? Some bills are easier than others to pass, right? Some of them just because more members are knowledgeable about the subject, maybe because more people are aware. But for technology type bills, that a lot of them, the laws themselves, even though people think of them as fundamental things that they deal with every day, the bills themselves are very technical, very wonky, some case 40, 50, 60 pages long. And so how can you, especially in a busy legislative session, when there's 8,000 bills filed, how do you cut through all of that? And how do you end up in a situation where stakeholders, which are people that have a vested interest one way or the other in a bill, are able to come together? And what we discovered was that you have to do it early. Okay, and I know for some people listening or watching, this may seem obvious, but it's not always. And so in that case, a year earlier, we decided to start having meetings with the people who are the most likely to want to get involved in the bill and to get on the side of that legislation. We used our IT caucus, right, to be able to go and spread information and educate our members about why it's important. And through that whole entire process, we listened and we learned, and only then did we actually try and lead on specific words on paper. And it's that process that we want to use again in the future to pass these kind of comprehensive but difficult to understand bills.
Well, and I'm sure, I hope folks come up to you and express how grateful they are for that whole stakeholder process. I'd be remiss not to add, as an alumnus of UT, their LBJ program, I met with Professor Fleischman and my former advisor and Professor Sherry Greenberg, who's been very involved with the Good Systems Project at UT. And at the stakeholder meeting recently, they were just floored. And I don't remember the exact quote, but it was something to the effect of, this is the first time real inroads between academia and the legislature being made on technology issues. And sometimes, you know, folks in the broader space don't move as fast as maybe we'd like to, but having this process, to your point earlier on, I'm hearing glowing feedback and excitement that, look, we're a part of the discussion, and that's by design. You want to hear various perspectives on it.
You know, as politicians, obviously we have a lot of hubris, right? We have a lot of pride. And so I think part of this is to accept some humility that there are folks that are experts in this, that deal with this, that are, you know, of future thinking, that have been, whether it's academia or industry, that actually know what maybe positive and negative effects of those bills were. And you know how it is down at the Capitol. Sometimes people will file a bill and you can cram it down, right? You can just say, I'm not going to listen, whatever. But that doesn't do anybody any good, right? We want to make sure that whatever laws we pass, even if they're few, that they're done right to minimize the potential negative effects and maximize the positive ones.
Yeah, no, amen to that. And to build on, okay, so the stakeholder process, House Bill 4, the data privacy bill, that was, we were talking about this before the show, when folks in different states are asking, you know, what works well, what kind of research is important, and talking points and testimony and all that. But you're right in that stakeholder process is what makes a difference.
And can I interrupt a second? So we just had our AI stakeholder meeting a couple of weeks ago, whatever. I mean, we had 175 people there. You
guys had to get a bigger room, right?
Yeah, right. And at first I was like, this is too big of a room, but it's not. In fact, we probably had over 200 people actually be there. And each one of them represented a lot of other either industries or groups and that sort of stuff. And so I just want people to know, when we talk about stakeholders, this isn't like a small room, you know, behind closed doors. This is a totally public event where we wanted everyone to be able to participate, include them in our email list, and we're going to have more of them as we go on.
Yeah. And I can't confirm it was not a smoke-filled room.
Right.
There was sunshine in the whole process. So, okay, before we get into AI, I'll ask you one last question on House Bill 4, the data privacy bill, because it's one of those issues that I think, from my perspective, correct me if you feel otherwise, with AI and all that's happening there, some national efforts and state efforts are forgetting that getting data privacy right on the front end, it's not a panacea, but it's an important step in the direction of AI transparency and privacy and control. So for folks who, you know, maybe were forgetting about the Texas Data Privacy Security Act, goes into effect pretty soon here. We're about a month out. So what, from your point of view, what is the legacy on that? What do you hope will befall Texans positively from that law?
Sure. And I think your first point was exactly dead on, which is when we're starting to talk about artificial intelligence, you got to understand that artificial intelligence really is data. It's about the data. It's being trained on the data. It's about creating new data. It's about implementation of controls and process to protect that data. So when we talk about cybersecurity, when you talk about privacy, we talk about AI, at the very center of all of this is the data that's been collected. And for me, and for a lot of other folks, we just understand that my personal information is my personal information. And we've lived in a society for a long time now where people have not been aware that this data is being collected about them. Maybe they felt that they have nothing to be worried about, so who cares? But part of the legacy, I hope, is just more realization that, hey, what exactly is being collected about me and my kids? Okay, how is it being used? Who is it being sold to? If it's stolen, okay, am I going to be notified of that? And what if it's wrong, right? I mean, some of these decisions that are being made on your data are being done without your knowledge at all. It's being done, whether it's you want to be able to rent a car, get a hotel room, buy a car. All of that data that's been collected about you and your family in the past is being used to change and influence your decisions today. And so what do we want? We want people to be aware of it. We want them to be able to correct it. And we want them, to me, minimize the amount of data they're giving to other folks. And I also wanted to tell industry that, hey, you don't have to do this, right? You don't have to collect a 13-year-old's information. You don't have to know, what school I went to or where I'm going to have coffee. I get your commercial interest in it, but that stuff is personal and private to me. And with HB4, we're setting the tone, and it's being used as a model in other states to say, hey, this is data. It's important. Let's protect it.
Yep. And it is... I feel data privacy is the rally cry when we get into, what is conservative technology policy and that philosophy there. And I know having Texas at the helm on that too, that makes a huge difference in the whole narrative surrounding it.
If you're a limited government person, right, you have to also understand that yes, there's business, there's industry collecting your data, but government is like one wall away from being able to collect that data. Plenty of stories where government has gone into some of these big companies and sometimes even building a data server inside those big companies. And so I am a limit. I think to some extent, and I say this as an elected official, government is probably the group you want to trust the least with your data. And so let's just try and minimize this and protect this for everybody.
Yeah. Well said. Okay, so I want to reserve an adequate amount of time to talk about all that's happening with AI. And I know we've talked about the really three major things happening House side, and you're involved in a leadership role in each and every one of them. So let's go through kind of what's happening. Let's start with the Artificial Intelligence Advisory Council. So you mentioned House Bill 2060. Let's walk our listeners through what does that process entail, and what do you hope the fruit of that labor is? Yeah,
so the AI Advisory Council was like our first thought about how to do this. And again, kind of what I just said, my first thing I want to do is protect people from the government, right? So when we talk about the Advisory Council, the idea is how do we create rules and procedures and processes, acceptable use process, a code of ethics, ethical framework for state agencies, okay? We don't want agencies to just collect all this data and then use it with unfettered ability, right? And so as part of that council, myself, Senator Dan Parker are the joint co-chairs of that. The governor has appointed 4 members of the public, each with different skill sets from law enforcement all the way to ethics. And we're having conversations with our state agencies to say, hey, how are you using this? How do you plan on using it? Creating an inventory of how it's already being implemented. And let's have that conversation openly so that, one, we all know what the guardrails should be. Let's come up with rules in the future. But also, some agencies that weren't thinking about it maybe in a certain way, and now they're listening to it and finding out how their sister agencies could use it. So that's the Advisory Council. Then, as part of that, and kind of independently, we have started the AI stakeholder process, right? Because I had already thought about, hey, I'm probably going to work on a few bills on this, and it's going to span a bunch of different areas. And so let's start working with interested partners, whether it's in academia or industry or what have you, to do that stakeholder process. And then Speaker Dade Phelan was incredibly, I think, forward-thinking and created a new House Select Committee called Artificial Intelligence and Emerging Technologies. And it's the and emerging technologies, what I think is also pretty cool about it, because it's not just about this shiny new toy. It's about how are we going to implement all new technologies in the state. Now, that House Select Committee is more focused on private industry, right? So not really about how the government is using it, but how are we going to protect consumers? How are we going to create those guardrails so that we can be a leader here in Texas when it comes to AI, but still manage the more risky situations?
Yeah. And so how is, well, let's start with the AI Advisory Council. For folks who don't know, you can watch this. This is all, you guys switch from House to Senate side.
That's
is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this whole thing is confusing, right?
I know. Well, this is where, we'll continue to post the links and all that. I know Spencer at the IT Caucus. So follow the IT Caucus on any social media, and it's really good at updating on when those hearings are happening. But we had you at our Texas Policy Summit, and I believe our panel on AI was the same day as the AI Advisory Council's meeting.
Right.
And you and Senator Parker talked about some of the things you're hearing and learning. I don't know, is there anything that sticks out when folks ask you on the road, hey, what are you learning? What are policy ideas? Is there anything that is a really big takeaway from that process so far?
It has been just, actually, I've learned a lot from it. So first of all, some of the cool things our agencies are doing already, right? And you don't think about, and this is Texas, so they're focused on efficiency and good governance, right? So you have, for instance, TxDOT, which had found that it takes about 3 weeks manually, effectively, to handle invoices, either payments, receiving of invoices, a lot of human labor, a lot of costs, all that kind of stuff. And so now they've gone from a 3-week process to a 27-second process when using AI. It's probably really accurate too, right? You have it being used in, again, TxDOT, by looking at cameras on roads, right? To find out where there's accidents so they can give help as soon as possible before people even call. It can detect these collisions by visually looking at them and providing people help, which not only gets them help, but also reduces traffic. They're saying 5 to 10 minutes per incident. But I've also been interested to hear about agencies that have decided that they are not currently going to do that.
Right.
That they believe that whether it's because it's about employee benefits, or it's constituent private information, or maybe it's financial risks, that they have decided that they're going to hold off on it. And so I've been pretty impressed by our agencies looking at how they themselves can or can't use it, and either taking it slow or moving forward. So I just think that Texas is leading on that. What I'm hopeful is in the next session, especially as we work through the budget process, that more agencies start looking at pilots. I've heard, here's just what this artificial intelligence is going to simplify processes that our government uses, which also means probably simplify and make less expensive some of our cost centers effectively. And done right, we're going to be able to help at the end of the day. So like if people are watching this, what does this all mean to me? More services at less money. Okay. And all the money comes from taxpayers, right? So how do we get more services so you're not having to spend more of your time in, for instance, trying to get help from a certain office or an agency, so you get that faster, simpler, more accessible to more people, and at less cost to you, the taxpayer. And I think artificial intelligence, if done right, is how we're going to get there.
Yeah. Well, and I know the report that'll come out at the end of this year too, that'll influence whether there's a digital code of ethics. And I believe yourself, Governor Abbott, Senator Parker, you're stressing the civil liberty component as well as savings for taxpayers and transparency, which, again, back to laudable conservative goals. That's the bread and butter, which you would hope and expect.
You have to protect people's privacy this whole entire time. You also, you have to be sensitive to the fact that, you don't want, for instance, to be treated people disparately or unequal or unfairly. You don't want people to be judged automatically and autonomously because of that. And again, that's where the government has all this data and this information. We want people to be treated right. And you want there to be testing. You want there to be audits to make sure that it's doing the right thing. Right. And that's what the goal is with the council and the report at the end of it.
Yeah, great. Well, we'll shift gears. And again, for the listeners, so that's the AI Advisory Council focusing on government application. Let's go the House Select Committee on AI and Emerging Tech. So as of today, when we're recording this, there's been a hearing and a subsequent report that kind of documented the findings. What did you find during your first hearing?
Sure. Well, and so we're going to have more of the meetings. We were given a pretty quick turnaround for a report of the first one. We have just barely scratched the surface on the types of places where artificial intelligence can be used. But we had a really good lineup of folks. We had a general from the U.S. Army. We had people who focused on political and election use of artificial intelligence. We had cybersecurity. So we covered a lot. But what we know as part of this is the government we have to come up with rules and guardrails for this. Okay. There's nobody either that came to that committee hearing or who's looking at that and says, okay, we got to shut this down. There's nobody, right? We want Texas to be a leader and be innovative. But you heard a lot of scary stories, okay, about, and you couldn't see it. Like, if you watch this hearing, you can't really see what they're showing because they did deep fakes of each of us, right? And they do these deep fakes of each of us, and they showed us because some of them I would not want other people to see. But I'll tell you, it'd be like, and this is instantaneously. They just point at my LinkedIn and they just, put them in an orange jumpsuit. And there's me walking into prison with an orange jumpsuit. Or, hey, do a slam tweet against him. It knows the industry I'm in. It found out information about me, put me in a hoodie in an elevator, and made it look like it was a New York Times article. That's the kind of stuff that, fine, as an elected official, bad. But this can be done to every single person. Another deep fake that they had done was, okay, let's say you want to mess with an election in my district. That's essentially all they tell it and point to my LinkedIn. It's like, okay, well, his local paper is the Star Telegram, so we'll do it in the font of the Star Telegram. We'll take a picture of the City Hall, the South Lake City Hall, and put that on there and say, hey, the election's been temporarily shut down because there's an active shooter alert going on in the area. Put in a quote from me, okay? And next thing you know, I spread disinformation, misinformation on a global scale. Will everyone believe it? No. But can it be done at every city at the same time? Yeah.
And I know part of the point, too, is whether or not everyone believes it, we're starting to get into a territory where the fundamental distrust, not in institutions, but in speech broadly. And if we get to a point societally or otherwise where there's so much concern, shrouding the information economy, whether it's online, that we question everything. And so this is where, not that we're making the case that there needs to be heavy-handed regulation, but the reason why oversight and responsible guardrails is imperative is because really the way we exchange information and communication can be upended if we don't have responsibility baked in. And that's for folks who normally hearings aren't the most exciting thing in the world unless you're in our line of work. But Chairman, you opened up the hearing with deepfake audio and everyone on the panel, on the dais rather, giving their introduction via deepfake. And I thought this was cool, and maybe you can fact check me on this. The report you guys produced, you used AI to help synthesize some of the information. Is that the first time that a state house has used generative AI to develop a report in a committee?
I think it is. And we did disclosures. So that way
it was very transparent.
We wanted to be transparent. And what we ended up doing is we took the audio of the hearing, the video and the audio, ripped the audio out of it, took that audio and sent it up to AWS's AI speech to text, converted it all, and then we sent it in various blocks to large language models and said, hey, give us a report. Tell us what the recommendations that came out of this. Even I would say, hey, tell me what the 2 or 3 best quotes from that person so we could go and intersperse it. And I would say save this time. Obviously, since it was an actual committee report to the legislature, we wanted to do all the fact checking and make sure that it was right. And we wanted to disclose that we had done it in that way. And I think it's the first time we're able to do it. And part of it is, okay, this is probably how things are going to get done going forward. I will say there was definitely some hallucinations along the way and some quotes that never really happened that we had to take out. But to your point too about at this committee here, and what are some of the takeaways, and whether it was like deepfake conversations or even trying to convert this audio video into a report, and I've come to the conclusion, I think a lot more people come to the conclusion is we're in a role where there's going to be a lot of fake information. But the worry for me is not, hey, what information is fake that you're going to believe? The real worry when it comes to elections and even general everyday life is what's true that you're not going to believe.
Right.
And we're going to be suspect of almost every single bit of information that goes, which is not healthy. Okay, it's not healthy for conversations. I mean, even this, I know maybe you saw that someone discovered that at least my voice was very close to someone else.
Oh gosh, who was it? From the
Metallica.
Yeah, Metallica. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But
that was well done.
It was, and it was kind of close. But I mean, you like in that committee hearing, all I had done for each of those members, I had found some speech they had given. In some cases, 2 minutes of audio. And just think about, for the listeners here, is there 2 minutes of audio out there? Is it from one of your Facebook videos? And yeah, there is. And I took that, put it up to a company that for 20 cents effectively each created a reasonable sounding facsimile of those members' voices. And you can make them say anything you want. And in that kind of world, how do we as humans evaluate truth and fiction?
It's not to be jocular, but it's almost as if we got to start the podcast. We have to have you circle all the stoplights in the picture to confirm you're not a robot. Yeah, CAPTCHA. But it's a real concern. And I know last session there were some legislative attempts at deepfake regulations surrounding sexualized content, targeting minors, and elections and all that. And I imagine that's something that will crop up again heading into next session.
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's move. So you already hit on the stakeholder. Is there anything else you want to highlight during the stakeholder process and what's to come there?
I think for the message, for all three of those things, and then you can even throw in the Senate charges that got it in as well, is Texas is serious about artificial intelligence, right? We see the value, we see the risks, right? So the message I would say to anyone who wants to be involved in this process or doesn't want this process to happen is you're seeing that this is an important piece of everyone's legislative package going into the future. And I'm just thankful that we've been able to see that from the governor's office, from the speaker's office, and from the lieutenant governor's office.
Yeah. I mean, amen to that. I testified 2 weeks ago in the Water, Ag, and Rural Affairs Committee on cybersecurity for critical infrastructure, and I brought up artificial intelligence. And I mean, the point is, you look at the Senate and the House charges, and whether it's higher education, healthcare, and so on, AI is touching everything. And this is why, and this isn't performative, but your approach to having an omnibus comprehensive bill. Otherwise, we're going to have 450 bills targeting specific applications and use cases because AI will touch everything.
Sure. And I guarantee you, of those 450 AI bills, 449 will be written by ChatGPT in some format or another.
That's right.
We're trying to, obviously, people have different skill sets and they may see things that are necessary stuff. But at the rate at which artificial intelligence is touching everything, and as we get closer and closer to competing with humans on intelligence and so on, we're going to have to evaluate it in almost every case. And maybe and the hope is through some omnibus way of being able to say, okay, but I know, just like there is in the privacy bill, I think honestly that was one of the best bills we've ever done, but I already know we're probably going to have to make some edits, right? Because technology keeps moving forward. And so sometimes people say, technology moves. Well, that's fine. That doesn't mean we don't have to protect consumers, right? It doesn't mean that we can't do anything. We'll do this and have a process 2 years from then to go back and change where we need to.
Yep. Well, I guess if there's nothing else in AI, it feels unfair to ask you, what else you're going to be working on during the interim. But I think this is a good segue into that because in prior sessions, yes, you've worked on data privacy, you've worked on AI, but you also worked on health data privacy.
Sure.
We were talking about before the show some of the energy needs that are going to be associated with data centers and all that. So, heading into next session, are there other issues you're looking at right now that perhaps might be introduced, bills filed by your office or others that you think are going to be a part of this holistic mix on Texas winning in tech?
Sure. Yes. And it's everything. A lot of what we want to do is, and people have to understand, sometimes you have to pass a law to give people certain rights, right? That you would think that would come by default, but we want to make sure they do. So take something like right to repair, right? Should you be able to take your phone and do anything you want? Of course you should, right?
Yes.
So there's things like that. But to me, it's about privacy, right? Being able to protect your personal information, because I think it's a right that we should all have. It's about transparency when it comes to government. You should know how your taxpayer dollars are being used, right? it's about stopping waste, fraud, and abuse in our government. And to me, technology has a role in doing all of those things, making sure that the public has access to their government officials and what they're doing, making sure that they have the ability or a way to save money in doing that process. But we have and emerging technologies. So I'm interested in quantum computing, how we can make Texas a leader in that kind of just new technology. I mean, we won't spend too much time on quantum, other than if you want to think about AI is scary, but quantum computing is one of the things we better be the first country to get right. And
I think it's only because there hasn't been a dystopian movie about quantum computing yet. We haven't seen it.
Right. But I will tell you, the dystopian movie starts with unlimited energy, like fusion, running on a quantum computer with AI running on top of it, right? I mean, the speed, I may be off by a zero here, but effectively, if you get one of the more complicated encryptions that we have, whether it's SHA 2048, it takes typical high-speed computer 3 trillion years to break. The expectation is a quantum computer just a couple of decades from now might be able to crack that same code in about 8 hours. Yeah. Right. So what is that world like where there are nation states now that are able to decrypt things that you think are safe today? And of course, I want us to be the lead on that. We're worried about energy usage for all of this stuff, right? We've always want to be cognizant of energy. We want to make sure that people have access to it. Of course, there's things that have happened here in Texas that have brought those to light. But in the future, how do we make sure that we're the energy leader as well? Because when you look at it from a national security perspective, we are in a war, or in a virtual potential war with some countries, and we are technological leaders. But in other countries, they're energy leaders. They can build a plant without having to go through all the red tape and the bureaucracy we do. So all of those things are going to work together to make us hopefully the leaders again. Yeah.
Well, we'll do, since you're the first lawmaker, we can end the show by, optimistic note. And you've been optimistic throughout. So I feel like, I don't have to do this little tagline for it. But, you're talking about whether it's AI, energy, all the things you just laid out. What is your vision for Texas in 10 to 15 years? And you can juxtapose with California. You can just say, this is what I envision Texas is headed towards with its tech and innovation.
You could almost draw a line about how quickly Texas is leading. And it is in large part due to the way that we look at what government's role is for people. It's about giving people the freedom, the liberty to take any job that they want, to have these opportunities here in Texas that they might not in other places. Hey, high taxes isn't just, okay, we'll have to pay more. It's a restriction on your liberties, right? The ability to do what you want. And it's that freedom that I think that comes from Texas in terms of how we regulate, our common sense view of those things that provide these incredible innovation. We're going to take the mantle. I mean, you just draw the chart. I mean, at the same exact time that we're already looking at another $30 billion surplus, I talked to California Assembly members, right? And they're trying to do a $55 billion hole. And while they're dealing with that, we can keep investing, and we are going to invest in Texans.
Yeah. Well, amen. And I guess in conclusion, thanks for your leadership on all this. And I should say that, you mentioned the California Assembly, and I know NTSL and certain national organizations, that because of that vision that you just articulated, and because of that linear growth and progression we're seeing, other states are following Texas, and where the federal government will continue to fall short in data privacy, protecting whatever it might be in the tech world. Every time that we move the needle on tech policy in Texas, it sends a signal to the rest of the country and the world, for that matter. So yeah, we're blessed to be in this state, because it really is a combination of great minds and leaders in the legislature and our entrepreneurs and industry. So yeah, the future is bright.
It is 100%. Awesome.
Yeah. Well, for folks listening, as always, texaspolicy.com. Stay in the news on everything we're doing in technology. We have research papers forthcoming and more content coming down the hopper. Until then, a reminder on the AI House Select Committee, I should say AI and Emerging Tech Committee. Be sure to follow that, as well as the Artificial Intelligence Advisory Council. We'll keep you up to date on what's happening there, but an encouragement, if you're interested, continue to follow that content. So again, Chairman, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.